Hi, my name is Ale, and in this tutorial, we will build an app that lets you generate QR codes for any URL, as well as then save the QR code to your photo library. Let's start by creating a new Xcode project, so we can select App, and we can name our app QR Code Generator. And we should make sure that the interface is SwiftUI, the lifecycle is SwiftUI app, and the language is Swift. So let's press Next. And we can select where we want to save our project. Perfect. So now that we have our Xcode project, we're going to start writing some code. We're first going to be building the UI of our app, and we're going to start with the empty state view. So this is when no QR code has been generated. So let's first define a reusable structure that will contain the empty state view. So let's add below content view struct empty state view, which is of type view. And our empty state view will take in a width parameter that will provide the width of the screen. So let width, which is of type cgfloat. We're going to define a variable that will be the image length. So the image length will just be width divided by 2.5, and this will be used for the image that we show in the empty state view. So private var image length, which is of type cgfloat, and this is a computed property which will return width divided by 2.5. Now we can actually add the body of our view. So var body, which is some view. And first we're going to add a vertical stack or vstack. And inside our vstack, we're going to have an image with the system name QR code. This image will be resizable, and it will have a frame with a width of image length and a height of image length as well. Now we're also going to add a text below our image. So text, and I'm going to add here the string create your own QR code. We're going to add some padding at the top of the text with the padding modifier, and we'll say that we only want it at the top. Now finally, we're going to change the color of both the image and the text, and to do that, we can add the foreground color modifier below our vertical stack. So foreground color, and in this case, I'm going to use the system gray UI color. So I'm going to create a color object from UI color.system gray. Perfect. So now that we have our empty state view, we're going to go back to our content view and use the empty state view to show when no QR code has been generated. We're also going to add the navigation bar as well as the text field and the button where the user will enter the URL and press the button to generate the QR code. So before we add the UI elements here, we're going to add first a state variable that will hold the input or the text that the user enters on the text field. So this will be at state private var URL input, which is a string, and initially this string will be empty. Now we're going to go to the body of our content view, and we can get rid of this text. And first, what we're going to add is a navigation view. Inside our navigation view, we're going to have a vertical stack and then a horizontal stack that will include the text field and the button. And we're also going to add the empty state view. So now the empty state view, like I said earlier, needs the width of the screen. So to obtain the width, we can embed everything inside a geometry reader. So a geometry reader lets us get the dimensions of whatever the content view is in this space. So let's add here a geometry reader. And the geometry reader will give us a geometry. So now we'll be able to obtain the width from this geometry object. So, okay, inside our geometry reader, we're going to have a vertical stack. And then inside the vertical stack, we're first going to add a horizontal stack. This is where we'll have the text field and the button. So let's add first the text field. Text field, and initially the placeholder text will be enter URL. And the text that will be shown in the text field will be this URL input. So we can provide it with the $sign URL input. Now we're going to change the text field style. Oh, we need to then parameter name here, text. The text field style will be rounded border text field style. And we're also going to change the text content type and the keyboard type. Text content type is URL, and the keyboard type is also URL. Perfect. Now, next to our text field, we're going to add the button. So let's add here button with the string generate. Now, the action of our button will consist of generating the QR code and showing it on the screen. So right now, we're going to skip this step. We're going to add our actual generator later. So for now, let's just add the button. And one thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this button is disabled when the user hasn't entered any input on the text field. So basically, when the URL input is an empty string. So what we can do is use the disabled modifier below our button. And this will be disabled whenever URL input is empty. And finally, we're going to add some padding on the leading side of our button. Perfect. So now we have the text field and the button. And what we're going to do now is use our empty state view. So inside our VStack and below our horizontal stack, we're going to add the empty state view. So what we're going to do is first add a spacer. Then we're going to add the empty state view. And like I mentioned earlier, the empty state view needs the width of the screen, and we can obtain this width from the geometry. So width geometry dot size dot width. And then below our empty state view, we're going to add another spacer. This will make sure that the empty state view is contained in the middle of the screen along the vertical axis. And now we're going to modify our vertical stack a little bit. So below our vertical stack, we're going to add some padding. And we're also going to provide the navigation bar title for our navigation bar. So navigation bar title, and this will be QR code. Great, so now we've set up the main parts of our UI. We have our text field and our button, and we're also going to be showing the empty state view because at this point we haven't generated any QR code. So let's go ahead and run our app and see how it looks. Great, so as you can see, we have our empty state view that shows this QR code image and the text create your own QR code. We also have our navigation bar with the title QR code. We have our text field and we have the generate button. And as you can see, the button is disabled because there's no text in the text field. But if we click it and then we type something, then we see that the button becomes enabled when the text isn't empty. Now, of course, our button right now doesn't do anything. So what we're going to do now is go back to Xcode and add a QR code generator that will take the URL in this text field and will generate a QR code to show in place of our empty state view. So let's go back to Xcode and we're going to add a new file which will hold the code to generate the QR code. So let's add new file, and this will be a Swift file, and I'm going to call this file QR code generator. So in this file, we're going to define a QR code generator structure that will have the method to take the URL and convert it into a QR code. So let's first add a struct that will represent the actual QR code that we generate. So this will be struct QR code, and this structure will have two properties. First, it will have the URL string. So let URL string, which is a string, and it will also have an image that has the code. So this will be let UI image, which is of type UI image. To use UI image, we're going to have to import UIKit. Perfect. Now we're going to add another import, and this will be the CI filters from core image. So here we can add import core image dot CI filter built-ins. This is where we'll get the filter that creates the code from the URL. So now let's add another structure, and this will be called QR code generator. So struct QR code generator. And here we're going to have two properties. First, we need a core image context. So private let context equal to CI context. And we also need the filter that we're going to use. In this case, it's a QR code generator filter. So private let filter equal to CI filter dot QR code generator. Perfect. Now all we have to do is add our method. So this will be public func generate QR code for URL string. This will be the URL parameter. And this method will return a QR code. This QR code will be optional because in case we're not able to generate it, then we'll return nil. Great, so the first thing we're going to do is make sure that our URL string isn't empty. So guard not URL string dot is empty, else if it's empty, we return nil. Now, what we have to do is convert our URL into a data object. And from this data object, we're going to create the code. So let's create a data. Let data be equal to data. And we'll create this data object from the URL string in its UTF-8 format. Now we're going to use our filters. So filter.set value, and we're going to set data as the value for the input message. So basically this is the input to our filter, and from this input we're going to get the output, which is our code. And now what we can do is obtain the output image from the filter. So let's add if let output image is equal to filter dot output image. Then from here we're going to create a CG image, and then from there we can create our UI image and return a QR code. So if let CG image be equal to context dot create CG image from our output image, and the rectangle would be the output image dot extend. Now from here, we can use the CG image to create a UI image that we provide to a new QR code. So let QR code be equal to QR code. And remember, a QR code has two properties, the URL string and the image. So we can create UI image from the CG image. Now that we have our QR code, then we can just return it. And if we're not able to get this output image, then again, we can just return nil. Great, so now that we have our QR code generator, we're going to go back to our content view and we're going to make some modifications so that whenever our generate button is tapped, then we use the generator to create the code and then show it instead of our empty state view. So what we're going to do is first create a QR code generator object. So private let QR code generator be equal to QR code generator. Now we're also going to add another state variable that will hold the actual QR code. So at state private var QR code, which is of type QR code, and it will be optional. Now let's go back to our button, and inside the button's action, what we're going to do is first dismiss the keyboard that is shown, and then after dismissing the keyboard, then we're going to create the QR code from the URL and then reset the URL input to an empty string. So first, to dismiss the keyboard, we can use UI application .shared.windows, and we're going to find the first key window in this list of windows. So .first is key window, and we're going to call .end editing and set the force parameter to true. Now after dismissing the keyboard, what we can do is call our QR code generator function. So QR code is equal to QR code generator dot generate QR code for URL string, and here we can pass our URL input variable. And finally, we're going to set URL input to an empty string again. Perfect. So now when the QR code is generated, it will be stored in our QR code variable. Now we want to show it on the screen, so we're going to create another reusable view to show this code. So after our content view structure, we're going to create a new structure, struct QR code view, which is of type view. And the QR code view will have two properties. First, it will have the actual QR code, and it will also have the width of the screen, which is a CG float. Now we're going to define the body of our QR code view, bar body some view. So inside this view, we're going to have a vertical stack, vstack, and our vstack will include a label and an image. So first, let's add the label. And now our label will have a title and it will also have an image. So the title will be QR code for, and we're going to show the URL. So QR code dot URL string colon. Now in the image, we're going to use a system image. So let's actually change the name of this parameter to system image. And this image is called QR code dot viewfinder. We're also going to limit the number of lines in our label with the line limit modifier, and we're going to set it to 3. And after our label, we're going to show an image with the code. So image UI image QR code.UI image, and the image will be resizable, and we're going to modify its frame so that the width is 2/3 of the screen's width. So width times 2 divided by 3, and the height will also have this same value. Great, so now that we defined our QR code view, what we're going to do is, in our content view, we're going to replace this empty state view with a conditional statement. So if our QR code is nil, then we haven't generated a code and we can show the empty state view. So if QR code equals nil, then we show an empty state view with the geometry's width. Else, we're going to show the QR code view. And again, we're going to pass here the QR code. Since we know it is not nil, we can force unwrap it. And for the width, again, we're using geometry.size.width. Perfect. So let's go ahead and run our app and see if we can generate and show the QR code on the screen. Okay, so let's type a URL. I'm going to type twitter.com, and I'm going to generate it. Cool. So as you can see, we have a QR code, and it's shown here instead of the empty view. We have our label, which has this little QR code image, and it also shows the URL for the QR code that we generated. Now, the quality of the QR code is very low, so we're going to go back to our QR code generator file, and we're going to make some modifications so that the quality of our QR code is a little higher. So let's go back to Xcode, and let's go to QR code generator. Now, to increase the quality of our generated code, we can define a transform that will increase the scale of our image. So after filter.setValue, we're going to create a transform. Let transform be equal to CG affine transform. And here we're going to provide scale X. I'm going to use the value 10. And I'm also going to use the value 10 for Y. And now when we generate the output image from the filter, we can transform it to increase its scale. So here in our first line of if let output image equals filter.output_image, we're also going to try to transform it using the transformed by function. And here we can pass our scale transform. Perfect. So now let's run our app again and see if the quality of our code increases. So let's see. Let's type twitter.com. And now we can press generate. Great. So as you can see, we have our code and the quality is way higher. Great, so I'm going to test a different URL. So for example, I'm going to paste here the URL for my YouTube channel, and I'm going to generate the code. Great, so that's the code. Now I'm gonna scan the code with my phone and see if it's working and if it actually takes me to my YouTube channel. Cool, so it actually works. It takes me to my YouTube channel. So now we have one more thing left to do, and that's to add a button that will let us save the QR code to the camera roll. And we're also going to add some text to the image that gets saved to the camera roll. So let's go back to Xcode, and we're going to add a new file. I'm going to call this file image saver. So new file. This will be a Swift file, image saver. Great. So before we start writing the code for our image saver, I'm going to define first an enum that will represent the image save status. And then also going to create a structure called image save result, which will contain the image save status. So first, let's define the enum image save status. And this enum will have three cases. The first case will be success. So case success. Then the second case will be error. So case error. And the third case will be library permission denied. This is a case where the application does not have permission to save photos to the library. So case library permission denied. Cool. Now we're going to define the image save result structure, and this is just going to be a wrapper for the save result. So struct image save result. This result will be identifiable, and so we'll add first the ID. Let ID equal to UUID, and then let save status, which will be of type image save status. Cool. So now we're going to define our image saver class. Before we do that, let's modify the imports. So we're going to import photos, and we're also going to import UI kit. And now we can define our class. So class image saver, which will be an NS object, and it will also be an observable object. Now it will be an observable object because we're going to be publishing the value of the save result. So the first property we're going to add to our class is a published variable. So at published public var save result, which is of type image save result, and it is optional. Now we're going to add three methods that will help us save the image to the device. So let's first define the headers, and then we'll actually work on the implementation. So the first function we will add is public func save image, which will take the image to save as a parameter, and it's of type UI image. Now let's leave this empty. Let's add our second function, which will be a helper function. This is a private func save image. Again, we'll use the image here. And we're going to add the label to add to the image as a parameter. So with label, which is of type string. And finally, we're going to have one more helper function, private func add label, and this will have the label as a parameter. And to image, which is the image to add the label to. This method will return a UI image, which is a new image that also includes the label, and it will be optional in case we're not able to generate the new image. Cool. So we're going to start by implementing the add label method. So here is where we're going to create a text, or we're going to define a string that will say something like, I don't know, scan my code, whatever we want to put in there. And it's gonna blend the string as well as the code and create a new image that will then save to the device. So first, let's define the font that we want our text to use. So let font be equal to UI font dot bold system font of size. I'm going to give it a size of 24. Then let's create a NS string for the text. So let text, which is of type NS string, be equal to NS string, and we'll create this from the label string. Now let's group together the attributes for our text. So let attributes, and this will be a dictionary or a map. So the first key we're going to add to our map is ns attributed string dot key dot font, and its value will just be the font that we defined. And then we're going to provide the color that we want to use for this string. So ns attributed string dot key dot foreground color, and I'm just going to use UI color dot system blue. Cool. Let's define the padding of our text. Let text padding, which is a CG float, be equal to 8. And now what we're going to do is get the size of the text and calculate the width and the height of our new image. So to get the size of the text, we're going to use the size function. So let text size be equal to text.size with attributes, and here we'll provide the attributes that we just defined. Now, the height offset of our image will be the size of the text, or the height of the text, and 2 times the padding. So basically the height of our image will be the height of the code plus this new offset that we're going to define. So let height offset be equal to text size dot height plus text padding times 2. So our width will just be the image's width. So image.size.width. This is the width of the QR code. And our height will be the height of the QR code plus the offset that we just created. Cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the UI graphics context to create the new UI image. So we have to call here the function UI graphics begin image context with options, and for the size we're going to create a new CG size. This CG size will have a width of width that we just defined, and then the height that we defined as well. For the opaque parameter, we're going to pass false, and for the scale we're going to use 0. Cool. So now that we began the image context, what we're going to do is set the background color of this new image. So to do that, we have to get the context. So if let context be equal to UI graphics get current context, then if we're able to get the context, what we're going to do is set white as the field color. UI color dot white dot set field. Then we're going to create a rectangle that will contain this color. So let rect be equal to cgrect. Here for x and y we're going to use 0, and for width and height we're going to use the width and height that we defined. And now we can call context.fill, and we will fill the context with this new rectangle or white rectangle. Cool. So now what we're going to do is draw the image in the context. after drawing the image, we're going to draw the text, and then we're going to return this new image that we just created. So to draw the image or the QR code, all we have to do is call image.draw, and we're going to call this in. We have to provide a rectangle where we want to draw the image. So let's create a new cgrect. Now for the cgrect, for the x value, we're going to use 0. For the y value, since we're going to have the text at the top, we want the y value of the image to be equal to the height offset that we defined earlier. For the width, we're just going to use the width that we defined earlier, and the height will just be the image's height. So image.size.height. Cool. So after drawing the image, we're going to draw the text, and we're going to do something very similar. So we're going to call text.draw. We're also going to use the in function and with attributes so that we can provide the attributes that we created earlier. Now for the in parameter, so let's create a new cgrect with x, y, width, and height. So for the x value, we want to center our text. So for the x value, we're going to use width divided by 2 minus text text size dot width divided by 2. For the y value, we're just going to add some padding to the text, so the y will be text padding. Okay, for the width, we're just going to use the width, and for the height, we can just use height. Cool. Now for the attributes, we can just pass here the attributes that we already defined. Perfect, so now we've drawn the image and we've also drawn the text in our new image. So now we have to get this new image that we created and then return it. So let new image be equal to UI graphics get image from current image context. Then we will end the image context that we were working in by calling UI graphics end image context, and then we can just return our new image. Perfect. So this method will take in our label, the QR code, and then it will create a new image that includes both the text and the QR code in just a single image. Now we're going to call this add label function from our save image method. So what we're going to do here is try to create this new image with a label. So if let image with label equal to add label, and we can just pass the label that we got to the image that we got. So if we're able to create the image with label, then we're going to save it to the photo library. And to do that, we're going to use UI image write to saved photos album. UI image write to saved photos album. We're going to write the image with label. The completion target is self. The completion selector is a function that gets called when the image either finishes saving or if an error occurs. Let's put nil for now. We'll add our function in a few minutes. And for context info, I'm just going to pass nil here. So if we're able to create the image with the label, then we save it and we can return. Otherwise, what we'll do is just save the image without the label. So we're going to call this same method, but instead of passing the image with label, we'll just pass image. Cool. Let's, before implementing this save image method, let's actually define the method that will get called if an error occurs when saving the image or when the image finishes saving. So let's define here at the bottom a new function at Objective-C private func. Let's call this save finished. And in this method, we're going to have three parameters. So let's see. The first parameter here will be the image. So image, which is of type UI image. Then an error. This is called did finish saving with error. This is an error, and it's optional. And then context info, and this is an unsafe row pointer. Cool. So in this method, what we'll do is, if an error occurred while saving the image, then we're going to update our image save result to be or to include the error status. Otherwise, we're going to update our save result to be success. So if error is not equal to nil, then our save result is a new image save result of type .error. Else, our save result will be equal to a new image save result with a status of success. Cool. So now we can go back to our save image function and update the calls to UI image write to saved photos album. So we're going to update the completion selector parameter. So here what we'll do is call hashtag selector, and we can just pass save finished. And we're going to do the same thing here below. Cool. So now we're going to implement our main public function. This is the function that will be called from our content view. And here what we're going to do is first check whether we have permission to save the photo. And if we do, then we're going to call save image. Otherwise, we're going to ask the user to give us permission. And if they do give us permission, then we'll call the save image private function. So in our function here, let's define the label that we will add to our image. Let image label be equal to, I'll add scan my code. Then we're going to get the authorization status to save photos to the library. So let photo library auth status be equal to ph photo library dot authorization status, and the access level that we need is just to write, so we can use add only. Now if the status is authorized, then we can just go ahead and save the image and return. So if photo library auth status equals authorized, then we can call save image with label, and we pass here the image as well as the image label, and then we can return. Otherwise, we're going to request authorization from the user. So ph photo library dot request authorization. Now the access level that we want is add only, so we can say here add only, and in the handler we're going to get the new authorization status. So status in, and what we'll do here is check whether the user gave us permission, and if so, then we'll save the image. Otherwise, we're going to update our save result to be of type library permission denied. Now, since this will modify the UI because we're updating our save result, we have to go back to the main queue. So dispatch queue dot main dot async, and here we'll check the new status. So if the status equals authorized, then we can call self.saveImage with label. So we'll provide the image and the image label. And again, here we can return. Otherwise, what we'll do is just update our save result to be library permission denied. So we create a new image save result with the status library permission denied. Perfect. So now that we have our image saver class defined, we're going to go back to our content view file, and we're going to add a new button on our navigation bar that will let the user save the image to their device. Before we go to our content view, let's go to our info.plist file. And here we're going to have to add a new key value pair to let Xcode know that our app will use the user's photo library. And this is just for privacy reasons that we have to add this key to our information property list. So let's press the plus button, and we're going to find privacy dash, and we need to look for the photo library permission. So photo library additions usage permission. So this is the one we're going to use because we only want to add to the photo library. And for the value, this is just a string that the user will see when our app asks them for permission. So we can do something like this app needs permission to save your codes to your library. Cool. So now our app will know that we're going to be using the photo library to save images. So now let's go back to our content view, and we're going to modify our navigation view to include a new button that will let the user save the generated QR code. Let's first add the image saver property to our content view. Now, since we're going to be observing the result of the saving, we will define our image saver as an observed object. So add observed object private var image saver, and this will be an image saver. And now let's go to our navigation view. So below this navigation bar title, we're going to add the save image button. So we'll use the navigation bar items modifier, navigation bar items, and we're going to add it to the trailing side. And here we're going to add the button. So let's see, we'll create a new button that will have an action and a label. So for the action, what we can do is first make sure that our QR code is not nil. So we'll call an assertion here, assert QR code not equal to nil. If it is, then we can just say something like cannot save nil QR code image. Now our button will be disabled if the QR code is nil. So ideally, we should never hit this error. And then we're going to call image saver dot save image, and we're just going to get the image from our QR code. So QR code exclamation point dot UI image. Now for the label, we're going to use a system image. So what we'll do here is call image with a system name, and the name of this image is square.and.arrow.down. Cool. Now our button will be disabled, like I said, whenever the QR code property of our content view is nil. So we can call the disabled modifier, and we're going to disable it whenever QR code is nil. Cool. So let's go ahead and run our app again and see if we're able to save the generated QR code. So I'm just going to copy the URL. Cool. So as you can see, we have now this button here, but it's disabled because we haven't generated any QR code. So let's paste the URL and let's generate the code. And now you can see that the Save Image button is enabled. So let's press it. So now our code should be saved to the library. So let's go to the Photos app. And as you can see, we now have an image with the QR code and the text "Scan my code." Now, we want to tell the user whether their image has been saved or if there was an error. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the save result in the image saver to show an alert depending on what the status of the save result is. So let's go back to Xcode and add this alert. So we're going to add a helper function that lets us create the alert based on the save status. So in our content view, we're going to add a private function. So private func, and I'm going to call this alert for save status. Save status, which is of type image save status. And this method will return an alert. So we're going to use a switch statement, and depending on the status, we're going to return a different alert. So switch save status. Let's define first the case for success. So case success, and what we'll do is return a new alert that will have a title and a message. So alert title. For the title, I'm just going to show the text success. So we create a new text object. We can pass here a string. I'm going to pass success. And for the message, we're going to pass another text. And here I'll use the string. The QR code was saved to your photo library. Cool. So now that we have the success case, let's define the error case and then the library permission case. So case.error. In this case, we'll return another alert, which will have a title, which is a text. And here I'm going to use the string oops. And then we'll also put a message in the alert, which is another text. And here I'll use the string "an error occurred while saving your QR code." Cool. Now finally, we have to define the library permission denied case. So we're going to use .library permission denied. And here we're going to return an alert, which has a title and a message. And we're also going to add a secondary button that will let the user open the settings app in their phone so they can provide access to the photo library. So let's return an alert. Now for this alert, let's add the title. It will be some text with the string. We can add oops as well. Now for the message, let's add another text with the string, this app needs permission to add photos to your library. And we're going to have a secondary and a primary button. So first, the primary button will just be a cancel button. Basically, this will just close the alert. So dot cancel, and the text will be OK. And for a secondary button, this is the button that will open the settings app. So secondary button, here we're going to use the default style. So dot default, and it will have a label or a text and an action. So for the label, we can just use a text that says open settings. And for the action, we can get the settings URL and open the settings app. So guard let settings URL be equal to URL from a string. And to get the settings URL, we can use UI application dot open settings URL string. So if we're able to create this URL, we'll open the settings app, else we'll just return here. So now that we have the URL, we can call UI application dot shared dot open, and we will open the settings URL. Cool. So now that we have our helper function, we're going to go back to our body, and we're going to show this alert whenever the save result changes. So below this disabled modifier, we can add the alert modifier. And for the item, we will bind our alert to the save result. So we can use $ image saver dot save result. And for the content, we're returning just the alert that our alert helper method gives us. So we're going to return alert for save status. We have to get the save result here. Save result dot save status. Save result in. Cool. So now when the save result has a new value, we will return an alert, and it will be displayed to the user. Great. So let's run our app and see if we're able to see the success alert. Cool. So let's paste here a URL, and we can click generate. Now let's press the save button. Cool, so as you can see, we have the success label here. So what we'll do now is test the other save status cases that we can have. So now let's go ahead and test the library permission denied case for our alerts. So let's go to the settings app, and we can click QR code generator, photos, and let's deny access to our library. Now, if we go back to our QR code generator app, let's generate the code, and let's try and save it. Cool. So as you can see, we have the library permission denied alert. And if we click open settings, it will take us to the settings app where we can change the permission. So let's say we do add photos. Now we come back and generate our code, and we're able to save it. Let's also test the case where the app asks us for permission to add photos to the library. So to do that, let's just delete the app, And let's run it again. Cool, so let's generate a code and let's try and save it. Perfect. So as you can see, we have the permission dialog. So it says QR code generator would like to add photos or add to your photos. And as you can see, we have the string that we added to our info.plist file, which is this app needs your permission to save your codes to your library. So we can press OK. And our code is successfully saved to our library. So we've saved it a few times. But you can see our code is here. So that is all for this tutorial. I really hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. If you want to learn something specific, make sure to leave a comment in this video and give it a like. And make sure to also subscribe to my channel as I'll be posting new videos very soon.